Hey guys, tonight we step into the shimmering, spice-scented corridors of the Ottoman Empire, not for a war, a banquet, or some gruesome palace drama, but for something far stranger, the art of the perfect nap. You're gliding barefoot over cool marble, the air thick with the scent of rosewater and oud, trailing silk curtains behind you as you approach one of the empire's most sacred places, its royal nap chambers. Yes, nap chambers. Pillowed, perfumed, and politically dangerous. You're about to learn that in this empire of sultans, scimitars, and silk, a nap was never just a nap. It was medicine. It was strategy. It was almost sacred. And if you did it wrong, well, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing inside Topkapi Palace, the epicenter of Ottoman power, and possibly the most nap-friendly government building ever constructed. Thick walls block the sunlight, tall arches mute every echo, and the cushions, oh the cushions, layers of velvet, brocade, and imported silks, all stuffed with feathers so fine they might have come from angels. These weren't bedrooms. They were nap chambers, specifically built for midday slumber. The Ottomans believed in something Westerners are just starting to rediscover: the tactical nap. When timed right, it boosts creativity, stabilizes mood, and even, according to the palace physicians, helps one govern with a clearer head and calmer blood. You slip behind a silk-draped partition and enter the private rest quarters of the Sultan himself. And it's not some open-floor plan snooze room. It's meticulously curated. Incense slowly curls upward from a tiny bronze brazier. A small water fountain trickles nearby, not for drinking, but for the soothing white noise. There's always a slight draft carrying the scent of mint leaves, which are scattered along the floor tiles. Why mint? To ward off dark dreams, says an old scroll tucked in the library vaults. And the Sultan? He doesn't just nap. He reclines on a serir, an opulent divan designed to mold perfectly to the royal spine. Ottoman physicians advised 30-minute naps post-lunch, followed by fresh sherbet and a light rose-scented face wash to revive the senses. No joke. There was even a specific rosewater formula used just for waking up. Now here's the kicker. When the Sultan naps, the whole court holds its breath, literally. Messengers pause in mid-step, musicians go silent, and even the kitchen staff switch to hand signals. There's a documented case, possibly exaggerated, but hey, of a courtier being demoted simply for sneezing during Sultan Ahmed III's afternoon slumber. But these chambers weren't just for royalty. High-ranking viziers and court ladies had their own rest zones, designed with equal flair. In fact, Topkapi had an entire wing unofficially dubbed the Dreaming Wing by later historians. Courtiers would slip away after lunch, not to gossip or conspire, but to sleep, in absolute silence. And if you were caught skipping your nap too often, it was considered an affront to your own health and loyalty. Now, let's zoom out a bit. Why all this emphasis on napping? Well, the Ottomans borrowed heavily from both Islamic teachings and ancient Persian medicine, both of which revered the kailula, a short midday sleep, as a sign of wisdom. Islamic scholars like Al-Ghazali wrote that the nap sharpens the mind and invites divine visions. Persian traditions tied naps to bodily humors. Yes, the old balance your bile and phlegm approach. Napping at the wrong hour could supposedly overheat your liver. No, really? And if you're imagining loud snoring and open mouths, stop right there. Court etiquette manuals from the 16th century actually detailed ideal nap posture. Lie on your right side, arms slightly tucked, mouth closed. One instruction even reads, "Do not let the tongue wag, for it may cause frightful dreaming." Who knew napping had a rule book? Now comes our first truly strange detail. The Sultan's nap wasn't just a personal indulgence, it was a political clock. Certain decisions, meetings, and even military briefings had to wait until the nap concluded. When he sleeps, time is paused, one foreign ambassador wrote in awe. He wasn't exaggerating. The Sultan's wake-up time triggered a chain of events, like setting off a domino line of state business. Sleep too long, and foreign envoys waited. Wake too soon, and someone might lose their head for rushing you. And yes, there were sleep-related superstitions. It was believed that dreams in royal nap chambers could predict the outcome of campaigns or reveal traitors. One well-preserved diary from a 17th century vizier even notes a recurring dream of a white falcon landing on his windowsill, interpreted by court dream interpreters as a sign of forthcoming promotion, which, days later, actually happened. Coincidence? Historians still argue whether these dream symbolic rituals had real influence or just fed the gossip mills of court life. But the dream interpreters were real, and they were on the payroll. Known as tabirchi, these specialists were trained in dream lexicons and symbolism. Their job? Decode what the Sultan saw during his nap, and occasionally recommend diet changes or sleeping positions based on the vision. Try hiring one of those through a modern sleep app. Meanwhile, the royal laundry included slumber linens, changed daily, and spritzed with diluted orange blossom water. The idea was simple. Good smells equal good dreams, equal good moods, equal fewer beheadings. You know, empire logic. Let's drop one last detail before you drift forward. If you were invited to nap in the Sultan's chamber, or even just next door, you were being tested. Loyalty, hygiene, breathing habits, seriously, and even how fast you fell asleep were quietly observed. Too much tossing and turning? Perhaps your conscience isn't clean. One unlucky courtier, according to a much-disputed tale, kept muttering in his sleep. The guards took this as a sign of treasonous dreams, and, well, you didn't hear from him again. So there you are, finally curling up in a corner, layered in scented cushions, knowing the empire holds its breath just beyond the curtain. You feel the heaviness of heat, the trickle of water, and somewhere, faint harp strings playing something haunting and ancient. If you dream now, what will it mean? Better not snore. You wake, gently, not with a jolt or a yawn, but the way you imagine a tulip might stretch open at dawn. Light peeks through carved wooden latticework, dappling your face with sun-filtered patterns. And standing just a few feet away, a man in robes holding a feather. No, he's not fanning you. He's watching, recording, making notes on a scroll the way a court scribe might track the empire's taxes. Welcome to the world of nap guards and dream journals. Yes, in the Ottoman Empire, some elite households, particularly in the palace, employed dedicated servants called uyku nöbetçisi, or sleep sentinels. These weren't just bodyguards. Their job was to observe how you slept, not for security, but for clues. The way your breath fell, whether you twitched, if your face frowned, smiled, or stayed utterly calm. Think of it like 16th century sleep tracking, except instead of a smartwatch, it was a solemn man with incredible patience and a disturbing understanding of REM cycles. If you stirred violently or whispered names in your sleep, That might be reported to your physician, or worse, to a higher official curious about your mental state. After all, the Ottomans weren't just interested in what you dreamed. They were deeply obsessed with why you dreamed it. Which is where the dream journals come in. High-ranking members of the court were often encouraged or required to keep detailed records of their dreams, not just wild ones either. Even a nothing much happened dream was noted. These journals were handed off to Tabirchi, the dream interpreters, for review. Imagine that. You fall asleep dreaming of a donkey wearing a fez, and 2 days later, someone suggests you be reassigned to a coastal outpost because your subconscious hungers for freedom. Sounds funny, right? Except it wasn't always funny. These dreams often informed actual decision-making. There's a story, documented, though debated, of a Janissary commander who dreamed of a crumbling wall. The Tabirchi interpreted it as a fortress in decline. Weeks later, that fortress was raided, almost as if the dream was premonition, or perhaps someone acted on it after reading the journal. Historians still argue whether these dream-based actions were self-fulfilling prophecies or taken literally by the state. Were they symbols, warnings, spiritual messages, or just glorified bedtime stories in silk bindings? Either way, lives changed because of them. And there were styles to dream journaling. One court lady, writing in beautiful Ottoman script with purple ink on rose petal paper, once recorded a dream in which she floated through a hallway filled with sleeping cats. Each cat wore a crown. She wrote, "I woke with tears. The cats stared into my future." 3 days later, her rival was dismissed. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or maybe she just had a great sense of narrative tension. You flip through one of these journals now. Fragile, faded pages, full of crescent moons, spiral clouds, and ornate descriptions like, "I drank coffee with a ghost in a vineyard of black grapes." Some entries are philosophical, others unsettling. One even ends with, "I awoke to a cold breeze. My mother's favorite song was playing, but she died last year." The practice of dream observation wasn't new, of course. Ancient Mesopotamians did it. So did early Islamic scholars. But the Ottomans, they elevated it. They ritualized it. For example, if you had an especially vivid dream, you were supposed to fast the next day, out of respect for what your spirit may have seen. Some would light a candle and place it under a bowl of water at night, hoping it would draw out true dreams. Others wrote them in code, worried about prying eyes or misinterpretation. After all, a dream of drowning could mean renewal or disloyalty. One particular physician wrote that the rhythm of breathing during a nap could reflect inner harmony or imbalance, so nap guards were trained to count breaths, sometimes even logging beats per minute like human metronomes. Seriously, this wasn't just surveillance. It was a science and an art. Now let's talk nap guards again. These were trusted servants, often eunuchs in the harem, or mute guards in the Sultan's private wing. Why mute? So they couldn't repeat what they heard. If you whimpered a name or cried in your sleep, no one outside that room would ever know. Unless, of course, you needed help. Sometimes nap guards woke the sleeper slowly by fanning scented air under their nose. Jasmine if they wanted you happy. Lavender if they needed you calm. Vinegar if they needed you fast. Yep, vinegar. Not the most pleasant wake-up call, but hey, empire life was unpredictable. And of course, dream interpretation had its skeptics. One chronicler from the 18th century scoffs at the whole idea. If dreams held such truth, the empire would be ruled by bakers and madmen. Yet the practice persisted well into the final century of the empire. Even sultans like Mahmud II are said to have consulted interpreters regularly, often after napping post-morning hunt. There's even evidence that dream journals were kept not just by individuals, but by entire military units. The Janissaries reportedly maintained a night log where soldiers recorded dreams that might concern tactics, omens, or enemy movements. Imagine today's army issuing a form that says, "Please describe any prophetic images seen during last night's nap." One final weird detail: certain elite guards had to memorize royal dream symbology. As in, they were expected to know what a red horse in a dream meant, or why a dream of melting snow might signal unrest. If someone woke from a nap screaming, these guards might even be the first to analyze the vision, before a scholar ever got involved. Now, lying back on your silk pillow again, it's hard not to feel a little self-conscious. Is your breathing too fast? Did you drool? Is someone writing this down? Probably. But don't worry. It'll just go in your file. And maybe someday, centuries later, someone will stumble across your dream of flying over minarets on a flying spoon and wonder what it all meant. You've adjusted to the slow rhythm of Ottoman palace life. Nap, dream, record, interpret. But just when you think you've mastered the snooze system, here comes a surprise twist. Napping wasn't just a private affair. Sometimes it was done together. In fact, communal napping wasn't just accepted, it was designed, orchestrated, and taken to almost theatrical extremes. Picture this: a room so wide it takes 10 full paces to cross. Sunlight filters in through lattice screens, forming golden diamonds on cool marble. The cushions, hundreds of them, are arranged in circles. The smell of clove oil and cinnamon hangs gently in the air. And lying in these circles are some of the most powerful men in the empire, napping side by side like children at a very luxurious daycare. You're witnessing the curious practice of the council nap, a ritual among viziers and senior bureaucrats that's both baffling and fascinating. Here's how it worked. After a particularly tense divan, imperial council meeting, especially when disagreements flared, members of the council would retire not to debate more, but to rest, together, in the same room, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic, let us put our quarrels to sleep, or genuinely health-based, rooted in old beliefs about digestion and decision-making. But records from the 16th and 17th centuries are clear. These group naps happened, and they were strangely ceremonial. Before the nap, sweetened rose sherbet was served to relax the nerves. Sandals were lined up at the entrance, sometimes by rank. The most senior vizier would take the farthest pillow, which was often slightly elevated. Yes, even napping had hierarchy. Now here's the quirky part. The room was often filled with gentle sounds, flute music, trickling fountains, and sometimes trained doves cooing from small cages built into the walls. The Ottomans believed soft animal sounds brought harmony to dreaming. Apparently, a cooing bird could prevent nightmares. There's no science to support that, of course, but it does sound better than traffic noise. You ease into one of the cushions and quickly notice how the room becomes heavy. Not unpleasant, just thick with peace. Even the air feels slower. There's a shared vulnerability here, but also trust. Imagine falling asleep knowing the man who just opposed your trade policy is snoozing 2 cushions over. And yes, sometimes these naps were strategic. There are records of alliances being silently cemented during the post-nap tea when everyone was still mellow and a little disarmed. It's hard to stay furious when you've both just drooled into the same imported silk pillowcase. Some even say sultans occasionally joined these communal rests, not as rulers, but as equal participants. Think of it, the ruler of millions, curled up among his ministers, pretending he wasn't still holding all the power while trying not to snore. Of course, not everyone found the practice so delightful. One European ambassador visiting in the late 1600s was scandalized. He wrote, "Imagine grown men of the Orient, lying in a circle, sighing and groaning like babes, whispering dreams upon waking as though they were visions." He thought it was laziness. But then again, his own king bathed twice a year and wore wigs full of lice. So, grain of salt. There's another variation of group napping that deserves mention. Synchronized dreaming in the harem. Now hold on. We're not going where you think we're going. This wasn't salacious. In fact, it was borderline mystical. Certain favored women of the harem, particularly poets, musicians, or those seen as spiritually attuned, were sometimes invited to participate in dream ceremonies. The goal? To see if multiple women could enter the same dreamscape. Seriously. The preparations were intense. Specific teas were brewed from poppy, clove, and a little dried fig bark. The women would be bathed, dressed in gauzy linens, and arranged in geometric patterns, circles, triangles, or lines, depending on the desired dream type. A geometric dream, they believed, produced clearer symbols. They would then fall asleep to the sound of a reed flute and slow, rhythmic drumming. A dream scribe would remain awake, ready to record murmurs or half-spoken words from the women. Upon waking, the participants were questioned. What did you see? Who was there? Was there a bridge? A horse? Did the moon rise twice? If two or more described matching details, it was declared a harmonic dream. These dreams were recorded and even displayed in illustrated journals. Watercolor moons, swirling staircases, eyes floating in the sky. Modern scholars are split. Was this early lucid dreaming, collective suggestion, or poetic performance wrapped in ritual? Whatever it was, it reinforced the Ottoman obsession with dreams as intelligence. These weren't frivolous hallucinations. They were seen as messages, omens, sometimes even orders. In a world without surveillance cameras or psychological tests, a person's sleep was considered the final mirror. And yet, it wasn't all so serene. Communal naps sometimes revealed rifts. There are accounts of a vizier rolling away from another mid-nap after a heated exchange earlier that day. Another time, a particularly powerful woman in the harem refused to speak to her fellow dreamers after they dreamed of her in a burning palace. "You think I'm doomed," she said. "Well, I saw myself riding a lion." No one spoke to her for a week. But it's not all political drama and mysticism. There's something deeply human about these scenes. Dozens of people, many of them powerful, wealthy, and dangerous, all lying down like children, trusting the same silence, breathing the same lavender air, hoping, just for a few minutes, to find something true behind their closed eyes. And you? You're beginning to see how strange and oddly beautiful this empire's dream logic truly was. So take your spot on the cushion. Don't cross your legs, bad for energy flow apparently, and keep your hands open to the sky. Because you never know, someone 2 pillows over might just dream of you. You're back in the palace again, though tonight it smells different, stronger, spicier, Incense curls like ghost smoke from long-necked bronze burners. It clings to your nose with notes of frankincense, black pepper, and something else. Musk, myrrh, something ancient and toothy. You follow the scent down a long corridor, past guards who barely nod as you pass. Eventually, you reach a small wooden door carved with crescent moons and 7-pointed stars. Inside is a chamber unlike any you've seen so far. Part study, part kitchen, part apothecary. Scrolls mix with dried herbs. Ink pots sit beside trays of dried dates. And at the center of it all, a man with 3 beards. Well, not literally, but between his wild sideburns, long chin tuft, and a curled mustache trained like vines, the effect is wizardly. This is a uyanukcha, the waker, or more precisely, a royal wake technician. Yes, the Ottomans had sleep professionals not just for entering dreams, but for exiting them. Waking up was serious business. It had to be done right. Not too fast, not too slow. Not with a shout. Definitely not with shaking. You've seen toddlers throw tantrums when jolted from a nap. Now imagine a sultan doing it, with actual execution power, hence, the professional waker. Wake technicians weren't commoners with a bell. They were specialists trained in timing, mood, and even scent science. They knew that waking from the wrong part of the sleep cycle could ruin a whole day, or, in a ruler's case, a whole campaign. They even had a system. If the sleeper's fingers twitched, wait. If the breath deepened, almost. If the toes curled inward, that meant the dream was ending. And then came the custom-tailored wake-up recipe. You learn now that Ottoman elites had personalized wake rituals, like designer alarm clocks with essential oils and vibes. One pasha reportedly insisted on being awoken only when a reed flute played a single note, B-flat, 3 times. Another preferred a gentle trickle of water over his fingertips. A court poet wanted a specific phrase whispered, "The sun waits for no rose." Others? More dramatic. One sultan, Murad IV, notoriously intense, allegedly woke to the sound of clashing cymbals. Why? Because he believed the soul only truly returned to the body when startled by thunder. Historians still argue whether that's metaphor, exaggeration, or fact. But let's be honest. It sounds like something Murad IV would enjoy. The wake technician's toolkit was elaborate. Silk fans, rose water in tiny droppers, trays of sugared plums, perfumed combs, strings of bells, even trained birds that chirped on command. And heaven forbid the sleeper woke in a bad mood. That meant a failed session. A true uyanukcha was judged by his client's face in the first 30 seconds of consciousness. There were, of course, mistakes. One notorious wake mishap involved a sultan's concubine being awakened too soon during a dream about drowning. She awoke gasping, furious, and demanded the waker be reassigned. He later became the palace gardener, and the pomegranate trees, by all accounts, did very well. But why all this fuss over a wake-up? It ties back to an Ottoman belief that waking was the moment of alignment, when your soul, your body, and the unseen world reconnected. If you botched that reunion, your day was cursed. You'd fumble speeches, misread omens, miss out on intuitive nudges from the divine. And in a world where dreams were borderline policy, that was a risk too great to take. Interestingly, the waker's job wasn't just about timing. It was about diagnosing mood. One court manual even includes a checklist: pupil dilation, finger stiffness, lip color, eyelid flutter. A kind of 17th century mood ring made of flesh. If the sleeper awoke cold and irritable, serve warm fig syrup. If weepy, clove oil on a handkerchief. If too cheerful, offer grounding scents like cedar or leather. One historian wrote, "To wake a man poorly is to walk behind him in shadow the whole day." No pressure. The practice extended beyond the palace, too. Rich merchants had junior wake attendants. Some mosques offered sunrise stewards who helped early risers wake gently for prayer. Even janissaries had a waking protocol during campaigns, a two-man system where one watched for signs of readiness, while the other quietly placed a warm cup of thick coffee within arm's reach. And yes, coffee was a big deal. In fact, the Ottomans treated coffee not just as a stimulant, but as a waking sacrament. It wasn't sipped groggily. It was served with ritual, on silver trays, with sugar cubes and cardamom. It marked the line between dream and duty. One general even wrote, "No war may be planned before the second cup." Now here's a weird tidbit. Some believed dreams could linger if the wake wasn't clean. That is, if you were stirred mid-dream and didn't process it fully, the dream would cling to your skin or aura, affecting your thoughts all day. To avoid this, wake technicians often performed a ritual brushing, using a soft feather or piece of felt to wipe away leftover dream residue. It sounds bizarre. It probably was. But imagine the relief of having your nightmare swept away with a peacock plume and a little poetry. And of course, like all good things, this practice became political. Some ambitious courtiers bribed their wake attendants to slightly delay their rivals' wake-ups, ensuring they arrived late to council. Others used it to curry favor, arriving early and perfectly alert thanks to their artisan-grade wake ritual. You're now watching one unfold. A young man lies asleep on a divan. The room is quiet. The technician crouches by his side, whispers something like a blessing. Then, soft bells, a dab of orange blossom water. Fingers hover, not touching. Then a breath. The young man stirs, opens his eyes, smiles faintly. Success. He reaches for his coffee, warm and rich. No panic, no alarm clocks, no jarring sirens. Just a soul, carefully retrieved from sleep and ushered back into waking life, like a prince returned from a distant journey. And just when you think you've seen it all, the wake technician kneels, bows, and vanishes like smoke behind a curtain. You're awake now too, but you're starting to realize that in the Ottoman world, sleep was never just rest. It was a ceremony. And waking? A delicate art with real consequences. You're used to thinking of bedrooms as private spaces, doors closed, curtains drawn, sleep safely tucked behind walls. But tonight, we step into a stranger room. No doors, no walls, and yet, the most sacred sleeping space in the empire. You're entering the Sultan's tent, the traveling bedroom of emperors, conquerors, and insomniacs. Yes, despite having the Topkapi Palace at his disposal, the Ottoman Sultan didn't always sleep in marble halls. On campaign or during extended countryside retreats, he rested in the imperial tent, a fabric masterpiece so opulent it was said to shimmer like a jewel in the moonlight. It isn't what you expect. This tent? It's massive. Think, banquet hall-sized. 15 to 20 men could stand shoulder to shoulder inside. Embroidered with gold thread, lined with velvet, and supported by ivory-tipped poles, it smells of sandalwood, dried rose petals, and, oddly, fresh parchment. Because the Sultan didn't just sleep here. He dreamed strategically. See, these tents were more than sleeping quarters. They were tactical laboratories. A sultan's nap wasn't a break from war. It was part of the planning. Before major battles, it was common for the sultan to retreat alone into the tent, draw the inner curtain, and lie down, not in fear or stress, but to seek clarity through dreaming. The belief was this: in sleep, the divine whispers more clearly. And if Allah favored the empire, guidance would come not through maps, but visions. One story tells of Suleiman the Magnificent resting before a siege. That afternoon, he dreamt of birds flying west. No weapons, no voices, just birds. He ordered a last-minute change to the battle plan, flanking the enemy from the west rather than the south. The victory was swift. Historians still argue whether this was tactical genius masked as mysticism, or if he really did take birds that seriously. Inside the tent, the bed is peculiar, not a raised frame, not even a thick mattress. Instead, layered carpets, rich with color and pattern, form the base. Then come the silken sheets, stuffed cushions, and fur-lined bolsters. The texture of power, you might say. And always near the bed, 2 small boxes, one filled with dream herbs, the other with response tokens. Let's talk about the herbs first. There's lavender, sure, but also things you've probably never tried to sleep with. Powdered mastic, dried pomegranate skin, shaved sandalwood, a bit of deer musk, and, get this, fermented fig milk. Certain blends were burned gently before sleep, others were sprinkled into wine or warm milk, all of it aimed at controlling the dream. Want clarity? Use clove. Want to forget? Burn basil. Want to speak with the prophet? Good luck, but try saffron and rosewater. These weren't just old wives' tales. The court employed munechims, a mix of astrologer, pharmacologist, and dream consultant, who tailored these potions like sleep sommeliers. A dreamy cocktail menu, 500 years ahead of its time. Now the second box, the one with response tokens. This is where it gets eerie. After waking, the Sultan could respond to his dream without words. Instead, he chose from dozens of carved objects: a tiny lion for courage, a broken sword for betrayal, a rising sun for hope, and so on. He'd place the chosen object on a velvet tray outside his tent. Within minutes, the palace scribes or advisors would interpret the message and issue orders accordingly. Imagine that. The fate of cities, lives, entire provinces, decided with a single carved turtle. And then there's the ritual of the night compass. Each tent was aligned carefully, true north, no exceptions, not just for prayer, but because the Ottomans believed dream direction mattered. Dreams dreamt while facing west were said to reveal deception. Eastward dreams revealed opportunity. South was for love, north for power. A misaligned bed could distort the dream's meaning, like whispering into the wrong end of a horn. You can't help but admire the precision. The military genius of the Ottomans didn't stop when the swords were sheathed. It continued in the dark, beneath velvet and moonlight, where even the wind was weighed for omens. And while the Sultan slept, others watched. 2 guards always stationed just outside, silent, facing outward, listening for disturbances. A personal slumber steward sat closer, trained to interpret the slightest noise. A sigh? Let him be. A gasp? Wait. A whispered name? Wake the scribes. Yes, scribes. Because if the Sultan stirred and murmured words during sleep, they were captured, inked, and stored in the imperial dream logs. Hundreds of pages exist today, riddled with half-sense phrases like, "The river speaks backward," or "The sun hides in figs." Scholars debate them like Talmudic riddles. Most are probably nonsense. Some, strangely predictive. And then there's the taboo dream, the one story no one wants to believe. A guard in the 17th century wrote privately that he once heard a sultan scream during sleep, then weep. The next morning, he he issued a royal pardon to every prisoner in a distant province. No explanation, no decree, just mercy. The story isn't found in court documents, but it echoes in letters, journals, rumors. What did he see? No one knows, but it changed something. And that's the Ottoman paradox: mysticism and machinery woven into every corner, even the nap tent. You take a slow breath now, watching the tent flap move in the wind. A single oil lamp flickers. The Sultan stirs, lifts a hand, and selects a lion token. Strength, boldness, war, maybe. Orders will be sent at dawn. And you? You lie back beside the feathered bolsters, close your eyes, and wonder what you'll see if you dream with your head facing north. The compass spins gently, catching the starlight. You're standing outside a building now, low, wide, tiled in brilliant turquoise and bone-white marble. A soft breeze carries the scent of jasmine, mingling with the salty sweat of the Bosphorus. A bell tinkles gently above the door. You push it open and step into the hush of the Ottoman Dream Archive. Yes, a real archive. For dreams. You might think it's some secret cult chamber, but no. This was a legitimate wing of the palace, guarded like the treasury, overseen by a team of scribes, astrologers, and holy men. The Ottomans believed dreams were messages, not just from the subconscious, but from God. Not every dream, of course, but the right dream, by the right person, at the right time. That was policy. You walk slowly down the cool, candlelit hallway. Scrolls and bound tomes are stacked neatly in carved cedar niches. On each spine, a name, a date, a dream title. Selim I, 1511, the White Crow appears. Mahmud II, 1825, the sea opens like a book. Even minor bureaucrats could submit dreams for analysis if they were odd enough. There's one labeled Unknown Chamberlain, 1684, bread cries out in fire. You're already hooked. Each dream is written in 3 parts: the dream itself, the dreamer's interpretation, and the analysis by the court's taberchi, the official dream interpreter. Think priest meets therapist meets CIA analyst. You sit at a wide divan, open one scroll carefully, and read. I saw a camel standing atop the Hagia Sophia. Its eyes bled olive oil. Below, the people danced with no feet. Then a woman of no face gave me honey. I awoke in tears. It sounds like nonsense. But next to it, the Tabirchi's note. Camel atop mosque equals invasion from afar. Bleeding oil equals economic fear. Footless dancers equals ungrounded joy. Honey from the faceless equals false comfort. Recommend delaying the wedding. You blink. That actually makes sense? Ottoman dream interpretation wasn't random. It pulled from Islamic oneiromancy, a long tradition going back to medieval scholars like Ibn Sirin. There were rules, archetypes, symbols. A lion often meant strength or a ruler. Fire could mean destruction or divine punishment. Bread symbolized wealth or children. Water meant emotion. But the Tabirchi's job was to read the context, not just the symbols. That's why these scrolls mattered so much. In fact, there were entire moments in history when the empire pivoted based on a dream. One story tells of a vizier who delayed the execution of a suspected traitor because he dreamt of a white dove nesting in the man's turban. The analysis? The dove equals divine truth. The turban equals wisdom. Spare him. A month later, that man exposed a real conspiracy. Did that happen exactly as written? Historians still argue, but the record exists and was treated as legitimate evidence at the time. In the Ottoman mind, Dreams weren't fiction. They were intelligence. And it wasn't just dreams from men that were valued. Women, particularly concubines and mothers of sultans, were known to receive powerful dreams. One of the most famous comes from Hafsa Sultan, mother of Suleiman the Magnificent. She dreamt of a tree so tall it pierced the sky, and its branches shaded the world. Suleiman was just a boy then. The dream was interpreted. Your son will rule lands beyond your imagining. She began treating him like a future emperor immediately. Coincidence? You decide. But not every dream had happy endings. There's one chilling scroll you read now, shaky script barely legible. I saw myself climbing a tower made of fish bones. At the top, I found no flag, only a mirror. In it, my face was gone. I wept. Interpretation. Pursuit of ambition without legacy. He fears erasure. It's signed by Ibrahim Pasha, who, 2 years later, was executed by his best friend, the same Suleiman. This isn't a horror show, but it starts to feel like one, because for every dream recorded, there were probably 10 that never made it into scrolls. Too strange, too dark, too dangerous to speak aloud. Yet those unspoken dreams still shaped lives. They influenced whether a daughter was married off, a campaign was launched, or a rival was spared. And here's a weird tidbit for you. Dream bribery. Yes, this was real. Ambitious courtiers would sometimes hire faux dreamers to claim they'd had prophetic visions supporting their patron. One eunuch claimed he saw a certain pasha, clothed in divine fire, leading the empire to peace. That pasha was promoted within the week. Later, it was discovered the eunuch had been paid off with a melon farm. So even in dreams, there was politics. Now your feet carry you to a corner alcove of the archive, a little darker, quieter. Here lie the sealed dreams, dreams deemed too potent or private to share. Some are tied with red ribbon, others wrapped in silk. One label simply reads, Ahmed III, 1717, the night with no moon. No details, no notes, just silence. You're about to lean in when a soft voice behind you clears its throat. An elderly man in a curved hat? The current archivist, maybe. He smiles faintly, whispers, Some dreams aren't meant to be understood, only remembered. And with that, the lamps dim slightly, as if the very air is saying, Enough. You step back, heart beating softly, mind swirling. Because if you thought sleep was just about rest, well, in the Ottoman Empire, it was also surveillance, symbolism, strategy. The line between dream and waking was thinner than a silk veil. As you walk out into the starry night again, the world feels just a little less solid, a little more dreamlike. The sun's setting now, casting long shadows across stone courtyards and bronze domes. You follow the winding garden path away from the grand archives, through the rose-scented air of Topkapa's inner sanctum, and into the private heart of the harem, where sleep, too, had a hierarchy. You're here to witness what might be the most bizarre nap schedule in imperial history. Welcome to the world of royal concubine sleep rotations. Yes, that's a real thing. Because in the harem, home to the Sultan's wives, concubines, sisters, mothers, and staff, who got to sleep when and where wasn't just personal. It was political. See, the Sultan didn't just pick a bedmate on whim. The entire process of rest, intimacy, and even dreaming was governed by a strict rotational system designed to ensure no single woman gained too much influence, unless she earned it. Let's set the scene. The harem is not some lurid fantasy. It's a sprawling, luxurious inner court, full of velvet couches, low brass lamps, fountains trickling softly into tiled basins, and whispers in 20 dialects. But it's also a military-grade system of schedules, permissions, and surveillance. Now imagine you're one of the favored concubines. You've been trained for years: poetry, music, etiquette, embroidery, Turkish calligraphy, even politics. You're not here for romance. You're here for legacy. Because if the Sultan chooses you to share his bed, and if you bear his child, you rise instantly in rank. But here's the twist. Even that intimate moment is part of a choreographed sleep calendar. Every week, a harem administrator known as the Kethuda draws up a sleeping roster. Only select women are allowed to be presented to the Sultan, one per night. The others? They follow designated nap cycles, often arranged around astrology, menstrual tracking, yes, meticulously recorded, and auspicious dream windows. That's right, some nights are believed to be dream-thin, ideal for conception, or even receiving divine insight. Those nights go to the most promising women. The rest? Well, they nap in shifts. Picture dozens of women dozing on silk cushions, but not all at once. Some sleep at midnight, others wake to tend lamps. Some meditate or recite prayers until the next cycle. This wasn't optional. It was designed to ensure a state of permanent readiness. You never know when your name will be called. And when it is, the preparation ritual begins hours beforehand. A full-body rosewater bath, application of amber and jasmine oils, hair braided in serpentine coils. Then, the sleep robe. Long, sheer, perfumed with musk and pomegranate. As strange as it sounds, this was their version of armor. The goal? Enter the Sultan's chamber calm, fragrant, and in a half-lucid state, the ideal mind for shared dreaming. The belief was that a woman's aura during sleep could influence the Sultan's subconscious. If she radiated serenity, he might see visions of peace. If her thoughts were chaotic, perhaps war would stir in his heart. The weight of empire nestled in a sigh. And this wasn't superstition alone. Palace doctors monitored hormone cycles, heart rates, even dream recall. A woman who dreamt vividly and could remember details? She'd be noted, tracked, advanced, because dreamers held power. Some concubines became legendary for their prophetic sleep. There's the tale of Gulnaz, a Georgian girl brought to the court in 1621, who dreamt of a burning tree weeping pearls. The next day, an earthquake struck the city, shattering palace windows but sparing the harem. The interpretation? Her dream had absorbed the disaster's wrath. She became a favorite. And her dreams? Archived. You might think this all sounds exhausting, and it was. Which is why there was also the nap matron, a role unique to the harem. This older woman, usually a retired concubine, tracked sleep health. She'd whisper lullabies, rub temples, sprinkle lavender over sheets, and ensure that no woman went too long without proper rest. Sleep was survival. Now here's your weird tidbit: sleep sabotage. Oh yes, harem politics could be cutthroat, literally and figuratively. If one concubine seemed too favored, rivals might conspire to disrupt her sleep before a key night. Loud sandals on tile, a dropped tray. One particularly cunning servant was caught slipping mild stimulants into a rival's rosewater. No sleep equals no charm, equals no power. Punishment? Exile to the cold chambers, Small, damp cells at the edge of the harem where failed or disgraced women were sent to live out their days, dreaming only of what might have been. Their beds were stripped of silk, their sleep silent and forgotten. Not all stories ended there, though. There's a legendary one, a girl named Aishi, banished after a failed seduction, who dreamt night after night of a blue phoenix. Her tale reached the Valide Sultan, Queen Mother, who demanded to hear it. When she did, she wept. The phoenix, she said, meant rebirth. Aishi was recalled, given new robes, and eventually bore a son who became governor of Egypt. Historians still debate the details, but the harem scrolls list her return, her dreams, and the date the phoenix was embroidered into the sleep robe reserved for the chosen woman. So tonight, as you walk the tiled hall and pass dim rooms filled with steady sleeping breath, remember, this wasn't a den of idleness. It was a battlefield, where dreams were daggers and rest was strategy. You pass one final door. It's ajar. Inside, a girl barely 15 sleeps, curled around a pearl-handled hairbrush. Her lips move, a soft whisper. The cypress bends, but does not break. You tiptoe away. Let her dream. You're back in the open air now, wandering a courtyard where the marble is warm from the day's sun and pigeons mutter to each other from the cornices. But you're not alone. Around you, a small crowd of Ottoman gentlemen rest on cushions, some propped lazily against garden walls, others sprawled on carpets with books across their chests, utterly asleep. You've just walked into one of the empire's most oddly charming institutions, the public nap house. No, seriously. These were real places. Picture an Ottoman cafe, but instead of serving coffee or chatter, it served sleep. For free. Or at least very cheap. You may know the Ottomans loved their public baths, but less famous is their affection for communal resting spaces, known in some cities as uykuhanes, or sleep houses. These were part shelter, part sanctuary, part low-tech wellness center. And whether you were a poet, porter, imam, or shoemaker, you were welcome. The theory was simple. A tired citizen is a cranky citizen, but a rested one, productive, peaceful, pious. So, right now, you duck your head into one such nap house in Bursa, around the early 1700s. The walls are soft gray stone. The windows are stained glass, casting slanted mosaics onto low woven cots. The scent is a mix of sandalwood, lemon balm, and faint sweat. A cat yawns at your feet, stretches, then falls asleep again without a care in the world. No one speaks above a whisper. Even the city sounds outside seem muffled, as if the building has told the world. Hush. At the front is a man in a wool cap, clearly the caretaker. His job? To manage blankets, clean bedding, and, here's the kicker, sing lullabies. Yes, this man gets paid to hum grown adults to sleep. And you know what? It works. Some regulars come here every day. Some sleep fully clothed, just an hour before evening prayer. Some come only after heartbreak, grief, or illness, just to lie still under the painted beams and hear someone tell them, it's okay to stop for a while. Weirdly wholesome, right? Now here's your mainstream historical fact. Ottoman cities were full of vakıfs, or religious charitable endowments, which funded everything from bridges to bird feeders. One such vakıf in Konya was founded purely to create and maintain a nap house for elderly workers and orphaned boys. Food, bedding, herbs for tea, and a song or two, all paid for by a local merchant who believed a soul needs stillness like a plant needs shade. Still, you may be wondering, why nap at all? Why not just sleep at night like everyone else? Well, here's the fun part. Naps weren't laziness, they were divine alignment. The Prophet Muhammad himself was said to take a short midday nap, known as kailula, and the Ottomans followed suit. Not just out of reverence, but because they genuinely believed sleep, especially right after duhur, noon prayer, cleared the heart and brightened the soul. Some doctors even prescribed naps for political anxiety. Yes, that was a medical term. If you were worried about taxes, your crops, your daughter's marriage, you might be told to go lie down in a scented room and imagine yourself walking into a lake. Nap as national therapy. Of course, not everyone napped the same way. There was the diagonal nap, feet toward Mecca, one arm behind the head, the other over the heart. The stoic recline, sitting upright, back against a fig tree, with eyes closed but ears open. And the scholar's slouch, where the book you were reading just slowly slides off your lap as you surrender to sleep. All of these had names, diagrams, and, yes, etiquette rules. Now, for your quirky tidbit, there was a popular Ottoman folk tale about a man who napped so beautifully, so silently, and with such symmetrical posture that strangers began gathering just to watch him sleep. He became a local celebrity. When he eventually woke up, someone asked how he'd perfected it. His answer? I picture myself as a poem. Let that one lull you. And then there's this. Nap poetry was a thing. Certain Sufi mystics wrote entire verses meant to be read aloud beside sleeping people. Soft syllables, repeating sounds, lines that faded into themselves like waves on silk. One fragment reads, "In sleep, the soul returns to its well. Drink deep, beloved, and do not dwell." You feel it, don't you? That tug behind your eyes? Now, of course, not everyone loved nap houses. Some imams complained they encouraged idleness. Some wives, too, annoyed their husbands used them as an excuse to avoid chores. There are humorous complaints preserved in local court records like, "My husband napped so long, our goat gave birth alone. He dreams of birds while the roof leaks." And so the sleep houses sometimes became battlegrounds for urban gender politics. But still, they endured for centuries. You take one last look around. A boy in linen robes snores gently, his mouth open like a baby bird's. An old baker hugs a cushion. A soldier rests against the wall, one eye open, but clearly nodding off. And the caretaker? He sings a lullaby older than the empire. Sleep, child of the crescent moon. The stars are your buttons, the night your shalwar. Sleep until your soul returns, and your tea is not too far. You tiptoe back out into the quiet courtyard, blinking at the fading sunlight. And you can't help but think, maybe we got it wrong. This whole idea of pushing through the day like machines. Maybe the Ottomans, in all their silk-robed, crescent-shaped slowness, were onto something. Sleep was sacred, and sacred things must be tended. You wander now through the corridors of yet another palace, this one less resplendent, more severe. The lamps are dimmer, the tiles colder. Something about the air is heavier, like secrets hang in it. And they do. You're in the imperial council chambers of the Topkapi Palace, where state policy was crafted, wars planned, and naps taken. You bet. It's time to meet one of the most sleep-deprived yet nap-devoted figures of the entire Ottoman Empire, the Grand Vizier. Think of the Grand Vizier as the Ottoman equivalent of a prime minister, except he didn't just advise the Sultan. In many cases, especially during times when the Sultan was young, uninterested, or, let's say, Preoccupied with harem politics, the Grand Vizier effectively ran the empire. Now, imagine this poor man's schedule: court sessions at dawn, petitions by noon, audience with foreign envoys, reports from governors, inspections of food reserves, then hours buried under scrolls and imperial edicts, all while navigating assassination threats and palace intrigue. So, how did he survive? Simple. He was trained to nap like a monk. There was a formal term, kesik uyku, or interrupted sleep. The Grand Vizier would deliberately sleep in 15-minute bursts, scheduled throughout the day and night. Yes, this predates your favorite biohacking podcast by about 300 years. According to palace records, some viziers would divide sleep into 6 micro-naps per day, between calls to prayer, after meetings, during long barge rides across the Bosphorus. One vizier, Köprülü Mehmed Pasha, reportedly trained himself to fall asleep within 60 seconds, anywhere, anytime, even with an ink pen still in hand. This was not just efficiency, it was survival. The job was so brutal that most viziers either died early, retired to a monastery, or were executed. But the lucky ones, they became legends of endurance. Your mainstream historical fact: Mehmed Pasha's son, Köprülü Fazıl Ahmed Pasha, followed in his father's footsteps, literally. His personal physician documented his nap regimen. He sleeps at sunset for a glass of time, again at nightfall for 2 glasses, then by candlelight for 1. In modern terms, that's about 3 hours total, spaced like clockwork. And the best part? These naps didn't happen in beds. No, he had a nap corner inside the council room itself. A low divan screened by a curtain with a silver sand timer and an assistant trained to shake him awake the instant the sand ran out. Now for your quirky tidbit. The nap curtain wasn't ordinary fabric. It was woven with the 99 names of God, a spiritual sleep aid. The idea was that even unconscious, the vizier's soul would be in dialogue with the divine. Because in Ottoman thought, sleep wasn't an escape. It was a realm of contact between body and soul, heaven and earth, power and vulnerability. But sometimes, even the nap masters cracked. One late record from 1768 tells of a Grand Vizier who overslept during a critical war briefing. When the Sultan stormed in and found him curled up like a child, he reportedly whispered, "Let him sleep." Perhaps Allah advises him in dreams. Historians still argue whether this was kindness or sarcasm. But this comment sparked a palace rumor that would persist for generations, that Grand Viziers could receive policy visions in dreams. And so, a strange new protocol developed. Before major decisions, like raising taxes or appointing generals, the Grand Vizier was often asked, "What did you dream last night?" You're not kidding. One policy on military pay increases is said to have been inspired by a dream of an elephant in a garden, interpreted by a court mystic as the strength of burden being fed. That's some next-level symbolic management. There's even a preserved dream journal from a 17th century vizier. Some entries dreamed of a cracked teacup leaking endlessly. Decision: replace the governor of Aleppo. Was lost in a fog where minarets had no tops. Decision: call emergency meeting on regional unrest. Rode a lion who whispered in my ear, "It's time." Decision: declare war. Sleep, then, wasn't rest. It was part of governance, a silent meeting with the cosmos. But even this system had limits. In the winter of 1682, snow fell so thickly across Istanbul that the palace guards had to use shovels to clear paths every hour. The vizier at the time, aged, insomniac, and paranoid, abandoned naps entirely for 3 days. By the fourth, he was reportedly heard ranting about pigeons spying on him from the chimney. He was removed 2 days later. The new vizier's first act? He restored the nap corner. Now here's something practical from all this. The Ottoman vizier's pillow wasn't soft. It was made from firmly packed lavender and dried myrtle, designed to support the neck at a specific 33-degree angle. It gave just enough lift to allow dreaming without slipping into deep sleep, because remember, these naps weren't meant to refresh. They were meant to sharpen. To nap like a vizier was to carry the empire in your sleep. And sometimes, quite literally, in your dreams. You step out of the council chamber now, and night has fully fallen. The palace feels quieter, more secretive. A servant with a lantern hurries past. Somewhere far off, you hear the muezzin call the final prayer of the day. And for a moment, you picture yourself lying on a firm divan, heart racing from political dread, a nap curtain drawn close, and the weight of 1,000 decisions pressing on your chest. Sleep wouldn't come easy. But if it did, it might change history. Tonight, you're not in a palace. You're not even in a proper house. You're lying under a thick wool blanket in a drafty wooden room, where the wind groans through the shutters and the floor creaks when no one walks. And yet, you're surrounded by warmth, laughter, snoring, and the smell of lentil stew. Welcome to an Ottoman caravanserai, the roadside motel of the empire. But not just a place to rest. Oh no. This was a ritual in itself, the nomad's nap. It's the 17th century, and you're on the Silk Road, somewhere between Erzurum and Aleppo. You've walked for hours, maybe days. Your boots are cracked. Your donkey hates you. And your merchant guide insists you'll find the best lentils in all of Anatolia at the next stop. He's not wrong. The caravanserai looms up like a stone fortress, 2 stories, high walls, heavy doors. It opens just before sunset, when weary travelers shuffle in, all dust and sunburn. There are Armenian rug dealers, Greek olive traders, Persian musicians, and a handful of Ottoman janissaries with swords so big they clang against the walls. And what do they all do, without fail, after dinner? They nap in one large communal hall. Now, forget what you know about private bedrooms. Caravanserais offered sleeping spaces, not rooms. Rows of wooden platforms, raised from the floor, divided by low curtains or carved screens. You'd lay out your saddlebag as a pillow, or, if you were lucky, borrow a camel blanket from the host. And here's the mainstream historical fact. The Ottoman government funded caravanserais along major trade routes, not just to encourage commerce, but because they saw hospitality as sacred. Under Islamic law, travelers were to be fed, sheltered, and protected, sometimes for up to 3 days, without charge. And sleep? That was a right, not a privilege. So here you are now, belly full, knees aching, nestled between a basket of pomegranates and a man gently humming in Kurdish. A soft drizzle patters on the roof tiles. Someone is sharpening a knife. Someone else is snoring like a bear. And still, there's peace. The sleep itself is strange, though. Lighter than home. More alert. These people have learned the art of what's called the nomad's nap. A half-sleep where the body rests but the senses remain tuned. Why? Because travel is dangerous. And because even in rest, vigilance was a survival skill. You're trained to wake instantly at the sound of coin purses jingling, or at the whisper of a new merchant arriving, or, more dramatically, at the whinny of a horse, signaling bandits nearby. These naps were often taken in short waves, 20 minutes asleep, 10 minutes half awake. Repeat. No clocks. Just the rhythm of foot traffic and instinct. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some caravanserais provided aromatic nap tokens, small cloth sachets of mint, rose, or musk, tied to a string and hung near your nose. The scent helped travelers relax without fully losing consciousness. Think of it as the 17th century version of a sleep app. Some even tied small copper bells to their wrists or belts, so if someone tried to rob them in their sleep, the bell would jingle and wake them. Sleepwear as a security system. And if you think that sounds extreme, just wait. Some wealthier travelers hired professional nappers. Yes, really. In cities like Kayseri or Damascus, there were men, often elderly, sometimes blind, who would accompany caravans as paid sleep watchers. Their job was to sit beside the sleeping merchant, mutter prayers, and gently jostle him awake at danger. One chronicler even wrote, "They guard your sleep like mothers guard infants." Of course, not everyone trusted communal napping. Historians still argue whether travelers preferred the upper floor sleeping platforms, more exposed to wind but safer from thieves, or the ground floor, where livestock sometimes shared the space but the temperature stayed stable. You'd think the second floor was better, until you realized someone above you might roll in their sleep and drop a brass kettle on your face. Now, here's something wild. Some caravanserais were famous for their nap cultures. In Aksaray, traders swore by the midnight rebirth, a group ritual where, at the darkest hour, everyone would lie down silently for exactly 1 hour. No conversation, no movement. Then rise and share dreams over tea. Meanwhile, in Diyarbakir, one caravanserai had a tradition where the last person to fall asleep each night was awarded a free breakfast, but only if they could remember what the others said while snoring. Can you imagine? Some even turned it into a game, the Ottoman version of sleep over truth or dare. If you snored too loudly, you might wake to find your mustache dipped in ink. You get the picture. Sleep wasn't just necessity. It was culture, camaraderie, even comedy. But it also held one deeper truth. On the road, sleep was a gift. And the gift had rules. One 16th century manual for caravan traders advised, "Do not sleep before the aged. They have walked more roads than you. Do not sleep behind your guide. He guards your dreams. And never sleep with your back to the east. It dishonors the sunrise." Now that's poetic, slightly absurd, but strangely moving. You roll over on your own hard wooden pallet, wrapped in a blanket that smells like cumin and wet leather, and listen. A child coughs. A mule brays. A lute plucks a few lonely notes from somewhere near the kitchen. Then, silence. Sleep in this place is like snow. It falls gently, blankets unevenly, and leaves everyone dreaming the same cold stars. You close your eyes, one hand still loosely gripping your satchel, the other resting near your heart. Not because you're afraid, but because that's what travelers have always done. You breathe in the scent of saffron, wood smoke, and old wool, and you nap, not like a citizen, but like a nomad. You wake up in velvet. That's the first thing you notice. Not in a palace, not on the road. This time, you're stretched out on a plush maroon divan in the corner of an opulently decorated room with gilded tiles and the scent of jasmine wafting in through filigree windows. You're in a women's bathhouse, but not just any bathhouse. This is the hammam of the Valid Sultan, mother of the reigning emperor. And tonight, you're learning about the silk nap, a ritualized sleep tradition practiced by high-ranking women of the Ottoman court and their entourages. Let's start with a mainstream historical fact. Ottoman hammams weren't just for bathing. For elite women, they were also social hubs, sites for matchmaking, musical performances, political gossip, and yes, strategic napping. Especially after long massage sessions or bathing routines, sleep was considered a vital part of the cleansing process, a time when dreams might deliver divine clarity or soothe hidden sorrows. So here you are, reclining in a towel soaked with rose water, your skin still warm from the marble steam chamber. Around you, women lie beneath silken covers, mostly in silence, some with a hand resting on their stomachs, others gently humming lullabies passed down from grandmother to mother to daughter. And it's not chaotic or spontaneous, it's scheduled, coordinated. The silk nap hour happened during the third portion of the day, just before the afternoon prayer. No loud talking, no clapping, just the rustle of fabric and the occasional clink of a copper basin. There was an entire etiquette to this sleep. One quirky tidbit? Certain noblewomen carried embroidered sleep masks, stitched with talismanic phrases like Ya Hafiz, O Protector, or Sweet Sleep, Honest Dreams. These weren't just decorative. They were thought to guard the mind from intrusive dreams or dark spirits. The elite nap mat was called a serge. It was double padded, filled with duck feathers and lavender husks, and always aired before use. A servant, sometimes two, would fluff it while you sipped lemon sherbet from a mother-of-pearl cup. Imagine today's spa culture, but with 10 times the grandeur and zero awkward spa music. Historians still argue whether the silk nap was purely a courtly indulgence or held deeper Sufi influence. Some suggest these napping hours, especially in the women's quarters, mirrored the meditative pause found in certain dervish orders, moments where the body was stilled so the spirit could wander freely. And that wandering wasn't idle. You see, in the bathhouse, dreaming was not only permitted, it was encouraged. Women would sometimes wake from their nap and immediately share their dreams aloud, not to therapists, to dream readers, older women known as tabirchi. These women had memorized centuries of dream symbology. Fish meant pregnancy, flowing rivers signaled family joy, and if you dreamed of your teeth falling out, well, prepare for bad news. These interpretations weren't for fun. They were used to shape decisions. Should a daughter be married off? Should a political alliance be pursued? Which servant might be disloyal? Sometimes one dream could change an entire family's future. Here's a standout example. A record survives of a concubine named Aishi, who dreamt of 3 swans turning into serpents. The dream was analyzed by a palace tabirchi, who warned her mistress that betrayal would come from within. 2 days later, a maid was found smuggling confidential letters to a rival prince. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Aishi was just a better spy than anyone thought. But here's where the silk nap gets even more complex. The Ottoman palace was a nest of rivalries between mothers, wives, concubines, sisters, and lady attendants, which meant napping, even among cushions and incense, could be dangerous. Some women would lie down only after others had fallen asleep, using the quiet moments to eavesdrop, observe hand gestures, or memorize whispered pillow talk. There were rumors of sleep performers, women who pretended to nap, breathing slowly with eyes closed, just to extract secrets. One court journal dryly notes, "She slept too still, too long, and heard too much." At least one historical intrigue, the mysterious downfall of a powerful harem matron, was rumored to have begun with a nap overheard by a servant girl named Nigar, who dreamed aloud what she wasn't meant to know. So yes, even in slumber, this was a game of chess. But not all naps were conspiratorial. Some were genuinely sacred. The Valid Sultan, mother of the reigning Sultan, was known to observe a nap ritual involving Quranic recitations. She would lie facing Mecca, her right hand on her chest, her left gripping a silk thread that trailed into a bowl of water. If the thread trembled, meaning someone entered the room, she would awaken instantly. According to letters written by European visitors, these naps could last up to an hour and were believed to preserve youth, settle the blood, and sharpen memory. Sounds like marketing copy for an anti-aging serum, but it worked for her. She lived into her 80s, which was quite the feat. And unlike the viziers or janissaries, the women of the palace turned sleep into elegance. Even the snoring was romanticized. One poet described a concubine's nap like this: "She sleeps, lips parted like a fig in summer, breath soft as cotton on a lake. I watch and know the empire is safe." Sure, that's probably exaggerated, but when your nap style is inspiring poetry, you know you're doing something right. As you lie back now, listening to the murmur of fountains and the soft sweep of a brush cleaning rose petals from the floor, you understand something. These silk naps weren't luxury. They were armor. Against the noise, the schemes, the endless expectations of empire. In a world where your value shifted with a mood or a rumor, sleep was one moment where you reclaimed your breath, your body, and your dreams. Even if it only lasted 20 minutes, even if you weren't really asleep, you pull the silk sheet over your shoulder and exhale. Maybe someone nearby is pretending to nap. Maybe someone's listening to your breathing. Maybe you don't care. Because tonight, for once, you're the dreamer, not the watched, not the watcher. You're deep underground now, not in a dungeon, but in a cavernous domed room glowing with candlelight and heavy with the scent of cloves and dust. This isn't the royal court, nor a bathhouse, nor a roadside inn. You're in a Sufi lodge, or teki, in the spiritual heart of old Bursa. And here, sleep isn't just rest, it's a gateway. Tonight's story is about the dervish dream naps, those mystical, trance-like states that blurred the line between rest and revelation, between what the Ottomans called uyanık uyku, waking sleep. A Sufi lodge in the 17th century is unlike any other place in the empire. It's quieter than a mosque, more secretive than the court, and more alive than any place you've ever been. You hear the rhythmic thump of drums from deeper inside, the whirling of bodies, the soft hum of breath in unison. The air is thick with incense and focused minds. And somewhere between meditation and exhaustion, you feel your eyelids flutter shut. But no one wakes you. Because here, sleep is sacred. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Mevlevi and Halveti Sufi orders practiced forms of meditative sleep as part of their spiritual routine. Unlike Orthodox Islamic scholars, who emphasized structured prayer times and discouraged sleep during devotional hours, the Sufis embraced sleep as a mystical act, especially when it was short, intentional, and paired with fasting or chanting. They didn't nap because they were tired. They napped because it opened the door to divine visions. In many tekis, after hours of dhikr, those breath-synced, repetitive invocations of God's names, the dervishes would lie down in rows, heads aligned, feet pointed outward, arms crossed like figures carved on ancient tombs. These weren't full sleeps. They were naps of surrender. Surrender to God, to the self, to whatever arrived behind the eyelids. And not everyone was allowed to join in. First-year novices often stood watch, guarding the sleepers, making sure no outsider disturbed the ritual. And if a dervish began murmuring in his sleep, the others would sit silently, listening. Some believed God spoke through those murmurs. Others simply recorded them in leather-bound dream journals kept beside the prayer beads. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some techies had special nap robes, dyed in indigo and stitched with symbolic shapes, circles for divine unity, lines for earthly trials. These robes weren't worn during waking hours, only during the sacred nap. To put one on was to signal your body was stepping back and your soul stepping forward. And believe it or not, dreams here were sometimes shared in real time. Imagine this. You fall into that half sleep where you're not quite gone, and beside you, a voice starts whispering. The river splits. The bridge breaks. But I see a path. No one reacts, but the murshid, the spiritual guide, writes it down. Later, that imagery might guide a sermon, or a decision, or a pilgrimage. Historians still argue whether these dream naps were meant to actually induce sleep or simply deepen trance states. One theory suggests the dervishes used sleep deprivation on purpose, staying up all night before entering the nap, so that when they finally did lie down, the visions came faster, rawer, more intense. It wasn't about comfort, it was about thresholds, and some went deeper than others. One particularly famous dervish named Kelaleddin was said to sleep only 2 hours a night, broken into 4 30-minute trances. He claimed to see letters of light floating behind his eyes and spent years trying to transcribe them with gold ink on blue vellum. The result? A manuscript so dreamlike it was banned by the palace for causing too much yearning. Yeah, you read that right. Too much yearning. But these naps weren't always personal. Sometimes they were communal. On holy nights, especially during Ramadan or the Prophet's birthday, entire Sufi communities would gather for group dream rituals. After recitation and drumming, they'd lie down, form a circle, and sleep shoulder to shoulder on reed mats dusted with rosewater. One would be appointed to stay awake, record the visions. Another would softly play a knee flute until all had drifted. What followed was strange. In some records, multiple dervishes claimed to see the same vision: a field of burning poppies, or a bearded man offering honey, or a city where birds spoke Arabic. Scholars today debate whether this was mass suggestion or something more. And of course, not all dreams were welcome. Some dervishes described terrifying visions, falling endlessly, voices without mouths, deserts made of glass. These dreams were called kara uyku, the dark sleep, and were treated with extra prayer, fasting, and sometimes a ritual bath. A dervish who fell into kara uyku 3 times was sometimes removed from the lodge, not as punishment, but for his own safety. The idea was, his soul was too open, too vulnerable, and sometimes that made people dangerous. You look around now, and the candlelight flickers on faces that seem ancient, though they're only men in their 30s or 40s. Their hands are calloused from drum work, their brows damp from sweat. Yet there is peace here, deep, shimmering peace. One dervish beside you has tied a ribbon around his wrist, red with tiny silver beads. It trembles as he breathes. Another lies so still you think he might have stopped altogether. But then his chest rises, just barely, And in this lodge, no one interrupts a nap, because to do so is to close a door to the divine. You close your eyes again, knowing your own visions will not be recorded, but they'll still matter. You may see only drifting sand, or a river you recognize from nowhere, or a face you've long forgotten. But when you wake, the dervishes won't ask what you dreamed. They'll ask, "Did you return whole?" Because that's the goal of the dervish nap. Not escape, but return. You're blinking under a harsh glare now. Not candlelight, but the reflection of sun off thousands of glazed blue tiles. You're not underground anymore. You're in Topkapi Palace again. But this time, it's not the opulent inner court, nor the silken nap rooms of concubines. It's the imperial medical pavilion, tucked in a corner of the sprawling palace complex. You smell herbs. You hear distant mutterings of scribes and physicians. And there's a chill in the air that feels deliberate. Welcome to the Ottoman world of prescribed sleep, where rest was a matter not just of health, but statecraft. Because tonight, you're going to nap like a vizier recovering from conspiracy poisoning, a court astrologer with too many dreams to sort, or even a paranoid sultan whose sleep was guarded like treasure and treated with surgical precision. Let's start with your mainstream historical fact. The Ottomans had a well-developed medical tradition rooted in Greco-Arabic sources like Galen and Avicenna, and sleep was considered one of the 6 non-naturals necessary for health, right alongside air, food, drink, excretion, exercise, and emotions. Doctors didn't just permit sleep, they prescribed it, and they wrote elaborate instructions on exactly how and when to sleep. You lie down now on a firm, faintly herbal-smelling mattress in a shadowed room ventilated by slatted stone windows. A court physician is consulting a chart, not of your heartbeat, but your birth stars. Because yes, the Ottomans believed the best time to sleep could be calculated astrologically. Sleep under Saturn's influence? Risk depression. Under Jupiter? You might dream prophetic visions. And if you were ill, the timing of your naps was as important as your medicine. Your pulse would be measured, your urine color noted. A nap would be scheduled accordingly, usually after Zuhr, noon prayer, with exact wake-up instructions written down on parchment, signed by a physician, and handed to your valet. Sounds bureaucratic? Maybe. But consider this. Some sultans had clockmasters in their entourage whose only job was to wake them at the perfect moment. Too early, and you'd risk anger. Too late, and you'd miss divine dream messages or important morning counsel. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some Ottoman hospitals, patients were lulled to sleep with live oud performances. Musicians would play low, repetitive melodies specifically designed to relax the humors and slow the pulse. They called these lullaby prescriptions. And if music failed, a concoction of poppy water, wild lettuce syrup, and crushed coriander might be administered instead. This potion was literally known as the draft of forgetting. But sleep wasn't just medicine for the body. It was used to heal the mind. There's a little-known manuscript from the Suleymaniya library that outlines a program for psychic insomnia, describing how overburdened courtiers, those who'd lost sons in battle or fallen from political grace, were to be treated with nap therapy. The instructions? 45 minutes of silence in a domed room. Rosewater compress on the forehead. Incense of saffron and sandalwood. Followed by a story read aloud in a soothing tone, preferably one involving justice, forgiveness, or reunion. Basically, ASMR. 4 centuries early. And for the truly unwell, there were dream baths. Imagine a shallow marble pool, warmed to just above body temperature. You're placed in it after drinking a mild sedative. Musicians play. A servant splashes your limbs slowly, rhythmically, until your eyes flutter shut. You sleep in the water, cradled like a floating newborn. This technique was reserved for the grief-stricken and the politically exiled, men too dangerous to punish, too broken to heal any other way. But even in sleep, no one was safe from politics. Sultan Selim II was rumored to have employed decoy sleepers, servants dressed as him, napping in royal beds under the eye of potential assassins, while he slept in secret, in rotated chambers. One servant famously woke up mid-attack, survived, and was rewarded with land and a golden bathrobe, casual perks of being a body double. And then there's the case of Mehmed the Silent, a minor bureaucrat who once fell asleep during an important court reading. Instead of punishment, he was questioned. Why did he sleep? What did he dream? Turned out he dreamt of a shipwreck involving a royal cargo fleet. Days later, a storm destroyed the same fleet. After that, Mehmed was promoted. To what? Official dream sleeper of the archives. Historians still argue whether such roles were symbolic or truly believed to be prophetic. Some say it was superstition dressed up as science. Others argue the Ottomans genuinely trusted dreams more than documents. One particularly hilarious episode: a sultan reportedly postponed a military expedition because his barber dreamt the moon fell into a chicken coop. What does that even mean? Apparently, bad omens for travel. In the Imperial Medical Pavilion, you're lulled into this strange belief that your dreams matter, that your sleep is sacred, that someone is watching over your nap with a pen in hand, ready to transcribe your mutterings into prophecy. And that's oddly comforting. So as you drift into a nap here, guarded by attendants trained not just in medicine, but in silence, you realize something. The Ottomans didn't see sleep as escape. They saw it as diagnosis, a daily check-in with your body, your spirit, and perhaps even the divine. You feel the rose-scented air brushing your cheek, the flicker of oil lamps on domed ceilings. A gentle oud string twangs once, then settles into hush. Your dreams tonight might be simple: floating fruit, long corridors, a lion walking on its hind legs. Or maybe you'll see ships sinking. Either way, when you wake, someone will be there to ask, "What did you see?" And that answer could change everything. You're now standing on a ship, not one at sea, but a painted wooden model used in ceremonial parades. The air smells of perfumed smoke and roasted almonds, and a rhythmic beat pulses through the cobbled streets. You've wandered into the heart of an imperial festival in old Istanbul, sometime in the 16th century, where dancers swirl in embroidered silks, jugglers toss flaming clubs, and sultans watch from golden balconies. But look closely. Not all is celebration. Beneath a crimson tent in the garden of a vizier's mansion, nobles recline on cushions after a heavy banquet, servants fanning the air and passing sherbet in gilded cups. And soon, very soon, everyone will nap. Because in the Ottoman world, sleep wasn't just for the bedroom. It had its place at parties too. Tonight's strange tale is about the public, scheduled, and fully catered siestas that came after banquets, feasts, and royal processions, what some historians have half-jokingly called the most luxurious post-meal food comas in human history. And you? You're about to be a guest of honor. Here's your mainstream historical fact. During major palace banquets, especially those held in honor of foreign emissaries, religious festivals like Eid, or circumcision feasts for princes, It was common for guests to be allotted time and space to nap before entertainment resumed. The Ottomans believed digestion required rest, and digestion was not optional when 7 courses of lamb, stuffed vine leaves, rose sorbet, and syrup-drenched pastries had been served. The logic? Sleep ensured pleasure without consequence. A healthy courtier was a loyal one, and a sleepy guest was less likely to cause political drama. So after dessert came dream tents, lavish pavilions set up in palace gardens or shaded courtyards, draped in embroidered fabric and padded with carpets. Male and female guests, segregated of course, would lie down fully clothed, fanned by attendants, often lulled by soft music or whispered poetry. It sounds decadent, but remember, this was also strategy. Let's talk about a quirky tidbit. Some festivals even had sleep judges, minor palace officials whose job was to ensure guests didn't nap too long and miss the next event. They walked through the tents with perfumed sticks or lavender sachets, gently waving them under noses until eyelids fluttered open. One chronicler jokingly called them the Awakening Bureau. And some of these naps were spontaneous performances. It became fashionable among the elite to fake prophetic dreams during these rests. You'd hear murmurs like, "Oh, the moon, she's falling," or "a rose petal floats upon fire," uttered theatrically by noblemen hoping to impress nearby ears. The most dramatic dreamers might even be offered extra dessert or a quiet audience with the host. Yes, in the Ottoman Empire, dreaming well was a social skill. Some viziers went so far as to hire poets to compose symbolic dream narratives in advance, just in case they needed to impress foreign dignitaries or flatter a prince with a vision of greatness. These dream scripts were memorized like toasts. Think of it as the 16th century version of tweeting your dreams for clout. But there was also real sincerity behind these rituals. The Ottomans believed that dreams after a feast were especially potent. The stomach full, the heart content, the mind open. These naps weren't seen as laziness, but as a bridge to deeper perception. One court physician even recorded that naps after dates and milk open the doors of the heart and permit visions of celestial clarity. And if you've ever dozed off after cake and dreamt of flying, maybe they were onto something. Historians still argue whether these feasting naps were truly intended for physical rest or if they were more about status, pageantry, and showing off a mastery of refined indolence. Some say the Ottomans turned the nap into an aesthetic, an event to be curated and admired, just like their art and architecture. And speaking of architecture, certain palace gardens were designed specifically with sleep in mind. Streams were dug in curving patterns near nap tents, so the sound of water could soothe guests. Trees were planted in mathematically calculated arcs to provide optimal shade, and walls were painted with soft blues and greens, colors believed to aid dream work. As you recline now, you realize this isn't just a siesta. It's a dream rehearsal. An attendant places a scented cloth on your forehead. A breeze stirs the silk of the tent walls. Someone strums a santur just softly enough to send your thoughts floating. And for a moment, you remember a line from a 17th century poet. "One sleeps best when fed like a king, but emptier than heaven." You don't entirely know what it means. Maybe no one does. But it feels right. In a world where food was medicine, sleep was therapy, and dreams were public currency, even a short nap after baklava carried weight. So go ahead, close your eyes, and if you mutter something strange in your sleep, don't worry. Someone will be listening. You're stepping now through the cracked doorway of time into the final corners of an empire that once spanned 3 continents. The breeze is dry. The gardens have overgrown. The old harem gates creak a little louder, and the halls echo with a kind of faded music. You're in the twilight of the Ottomans, when sultans slept less like emperors and more like exiles in their own palaces. Because tonight, you'll discover what happens to nap rituals when power fades, when empire shrinks, and when sleep itself becomes a form of resistance. Let's begin with your mainstream historical fact. By the late 19th century, the Ottoman Empire, once grand, feared, and fabulously rich, was nicknamed the sick man of Europe. The courts, palaces, and rituals still existed, but many had become hollow performances, imitations of former glory. The world was modernizing. Steamships, telegrams, and train schedules didn't exactly respect nap time. Yet inside the royal residences, especially Yildiz Palace, where the last truly powerful sultan, Abdulhamid II, ruled behind closed gates, sleep was still guarded with near-religious care. Abdulhamid was deeply suspicious of the modern world, paranoid, lonely, and obsessed with dreams. Here's your quirky tidbit. He reportedly kept a dream log and consulted it before political decisions. If he dreamed of a lion pacing a white hallway, he would cancel meetings. If the moon appeared with blood in the water, he'd fire a minister. Sleep had become his final advisor, one that couldn't lie or betray him. You tiptoe into one of his private nap rooms now. It's quiet, not lavish, not anymore. The drapes are thick, the furniture mismatched. There's an antique clock ticking too loudly and a faint smell of rust in the air. But on the shelf, still, are vials of rose oil, and near the bed, one silver stick of musk incense, half burned. The Sultan would sleep during the day, often in short, segmented naps, what we'd now call polyphasic sleep. Why? Because he feared assassination at night. He trusted the daylight, and perhaps, after decades of governing an empire in decay, he simply couldn't dream in the dark anymore. Servants were instructed to leave no noise. Gardeners wore felt on their shoes. Guards rotated silently in pairs, never speaking unless asked. But the world outside didn't slow down. Telegraphs arrived from Europe. Rebellions stirred in the Balkans. The streets of Istanbul buzzed with reformists, liberals, and foreign spies. Historians still argue whether Abdul Hamid's obsessive naps were spiritual habits or political avoidance. Some believe he genuinely sought divine counsel in dreams. Others claim he napped simply to escape reality, retreating deeper into a world of shadows and symbols where he still ruled unchallenged. And yet, the tradition held on. Even as Ottoman influence collapsed, old nap rituals lingered in corners, in provincial courts where retired pashas snoozed on shaded terraces, in forgotten mansions where grandmothers whispered dream omens after afternoon tea. And in Istanbul's more mystical circles, a strange revival took root. Sufi orders, particularly the Mevlevis and Halvedis, began to explore the spiritual science of dreams again. They believed that in sleep, the soul left the body to commune with the divine. Their guides, not Freud, but centuries-old Ottoman manuals that blended astrology, theology, and dreamcraft. You find yourself now sitting with a dervish beneath a flickering lantern. He hands you a small book, yellowed pages, handwritten script, no title. Inside, instructions for the sleep of the saints. It reads, "Lie on your right side, clean feet, clean breath. Recite the names of the hidden ones, If your heart is pure, you may speak to them in the garden. This wasn't superstition. It was ritualized hope that even as the empire died, the Ottoman soul might dream again. And then came the end. The First World War. The fall of Constantinople to the Republic. The Sultanate abolished. The palace gates shut. What happened to the naps? Some say they vanished overnight, as if sleep itself had grown shameful, an old weakness to be replaced by productivity, nationalism, and electric clocks. Others say they quietly survived, in songs, in kitchens, in lullabies whispered to children with damp foreheads, the same rose-scented cloth, the same soft fan, the same whispered, "Let it be good, let it be sweet, let it be forgotten by morning." Tonight, as you stand among the ruins, dusty halls, fading mosaics, the rustle of pigeons nesting in forgotten domes, you realize something. The Ottomans napped not out of laziness, but out of faith. Faith that sleep wasn't just rest, but a meeting place, with ancestors, with fate, with God. And maybe that's not so weird after all. So here we are, at the end of this strange, drowsy path. The incense has burned low. The palace doors have closed behind you. Outside, the stars over Istanbul are starting to fade, like the last page of a book you didn't want to finish. You lie back now, imagining the rustle of old robes, the creak of carved cedar, the hush of slippered footsteps in endless tiled halls. The world slows, your breath deepens, and in the soft space between waking and sleep, you might hear the echo of a dream not your own, a eunuch's muttered prayer, a concubine's sigh, a dervish's chant. Everything feels wrapped in gauze now. No sharp corners, no bright edges, just stories folded into the pillows. And if you dream tonight of floating gardens, silver moons, or lions pacing marbled halls, well, maybe you're not the only one. Thanks for staying all the way through this Ottoman lullaby. You've wandered gardens, curled up beside emperors, and fallen asleep to the scent of roses and revolution. Now let it all melt away. There's nothing left to do. No more gates to pass, no more clocks to wind. Just your breath, the dark, and the faint whisper of a world that once dreamed with gold. Sleep well. Sleep soft. Sleep deep.